Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. I'm going to be sharing some of the books that I've read recently. I'm not really doing like monthly wrap-ups per se. I want to kind of just do like wrap-ups every like 10-ish books that I read, and I currently have completed 10 books, so I wanted to catch you up on those books, let you know what I've been reading, what I've been enjoying. So far this year, I feel like I've been in a like really good reading groove. I don't know what it is because last year I feel like was a mess for me reading-wise, but this year I'm really enjoying the books that I've been reading. I also noticed a really big trend this month where I cried a lot during a lot of different books, and that's super strange for me because I'm not really a big crier when I read books. I feel like I never really cry. There's only like certain types of books that always really get me, so that was kind of interesting to see. I think I cried like 3 times. And that's a lot for me with books. 3 out of 10 books, that's quite often that I'm crying comparatively, because normally I don't really cry during books. Also, I feel like I got a lot of these books from like my library. Libro.fm gifted me some copies, and I think I used Spotify maybe once, but I don't really have that many physical books in front of me, so I only have 3 that I physically own out of the 10. So yeah. I have been using other resources and reading my books that way, but I also really need to make a dent in like the physical books that I own. So I'm hoping in the like next few months I will prioritize my books that I actually have in my home on my shelves. Also, in my last video I talked about starting a reading journal, and I will say I have been successful. I have been writing down all my thoughts on the books that I've read. It was really helpful when I put together my notes for this reading wrap-up. So let's just dive in. I feel like I keep blabbing on and on. I'm going to just kind of go in order of when I read these books. And up first is Beautyland by Marie-Helene Bertino. I had a copy from Libro.fm and I was just going to listen to it on audio because my library, the holds for Beautyland were really, really long, so I couldn't get my hands on a physical copy. But thankfully I had my Libro.fm copy and was just super excited to dive in. I've heard really great things about this one. But basically we are following Adina, and she's an alien who is sent to Earth to report back to her planet because I think I'm forgetting this piece, but I think her planet is in danger. So she needs to go report info that will be helpful to them to save their planet. I could have totally gotten that wrong, but she basically talks to them through a fax machine. She sends them faxes on daily life, anything that she notices about human behavior, anything that like stands out to her that she thinks is interesting. But we also just like follow Adina as she's a child and then becomes a teenager and then an adult. We get a lot of her like inner thoughts and things that stand out to her about humans that she thinks is really interesting. So in this story, I feel like we don't actually know if Adina's really an alien or not, and that's like not even like really that important to me because I feel like growing up feels so alien, and I feel like that was such a great way to describe it. When I was reading this, I related to it so much, especially when I was younger, and feeling like I didn't understand like certain things that were like normal or like what was expected, and I kind of just had to like learn it as I went, as I'm sure like so many other people also had to go through that. And I thought her faxes to her home planet were really like sweet and funny and honest. That was like one of my favorite aspects of this. But we also get to see her relationship with her mom. And it's a little bit complicated, but I thought it was really, really sweet. And also I love Adina's best friend, Toni. They are so cute together, and I just like loved reading about their friendship. This one got me, like it got me to tear up. I was cleaning my bathroom, as I do when I listen to audiobooks. Apparently, I feel like every video that I've talked about an audiobook that I've really loved, I've been cleaning my bathroom. I was cleaning my bathroom and then I started crying because there's like one specific part towards the end. I feel like it's more so like the last third of the book where I was feeling a bit emotional over it. I wanted to keep following Adina forever. That character is just like stuck with me now. Like I love Adina so much. I did listen to it on audio, like I said, and I feel like the audio narrator may or may not work for some people. It took me a second to like get used to the narrator because it felt a little bit like robotic, but I also feel like it made sense for the book. Like I think it ended up working pretty well. One of my favorites of the year, I think. Like this one, when I was putting down my notes and when I was writing about it in my reading journal, it just made me like appreciate this one so much more. If you love reading about growing up and like friendship and mother-daughter relationships, I feel like you'll really love this. And then the next book that I read was Liliana's Invincible Summer by Cristina Rivera Garza. This one has been on my TBR ever since I went to Mexico City with Ivana and Kat, and Ivana had picked this up at a bookstore when we went there. She had this one specifically in mind that she wanted to buy. I immediately added it to my TBR. I wasn't sure if I was going to read it in Spanish or in English, but I ended up just reading it in English because I really wanted to get to it. I ended up getting my copy from my library. I got a physical copy, and I noticed that on Spotify there was the audiobook of it. I was hoping that they would have like the audiobook in Spanish, but I could not find it, so I don't know if it's like an Audible exclusive or something, but couldn't get my hands on it. So I ended up doing a little tandem audio physical read, and I really wanted to read the physical copy because I knew that there was like photos in there, and also there's like diary entries, so I kind of wanted to experience it physically. But the audiobook was also so good, so I would just like switch between, like if I was doing something where I couldn't physically read, then I would just listen to the audiobook. I highly recommend the audiobook. The narrator did a great job. And as for the synopsis of this book, it is based off something that happened in Cristina's life. So we're following Cristina 29 years after her sister's murder and trying to figure out exactly what happened the days leading up to her sister's murder. Her sister was murdered by her boyfriend. She was trying to get copies of the reports, like the police reports, but she was finding herself having to jump through so many different hoops to try and get those files. And then there was a few times where people told her that like even if you jump through all these hoops, like the file might not even exist. It was really frustrating to see how hard she was having to work just to maybe get her hands on these files. So she ends up doing interviews with her sister's friends and also reading Liliana's diary entries to kind of put those pieces together. And what a beautiful memoir, and I feel like she did such a great job handling her sister's story with care and really like giving us insight into who Liliana was as a person. That made it all the more heartbreaking. So this book definitely felt really heavy, and it felt more and more tense as we were getting closer and closer to the day that she was murdered and finding out some of that information. Also, there's like a chapter where it's different perspectives of her friends, and I really loved that part. I will say that it was confusing for me at first. I started the chapter and I was really confused whose perspective we were in because of like how she was talking about Liliana, and in my head I was like, wait, is her sister talking about her like this? Because it felt more like a romantic relationship. And then I realized, okay, no, we were like in someone else's perspective completely. But once I understood that, like I really loved that. I think it gave so much insight into who Liliana was and the people that she was surrounded by and her friends. But we also get like her parents' point of view. Like there's one section where we're reading letters between her father and Liliana. Like they write each other letters because her dad had to go abroad and he was like studying in a program. So those parts were really hard to read, especially knowing what was to come. But yeah, I just really loved this. I'm so glad that Cristina was able to tell her sister's story. And she also talked a bit about femicide in Mexico, and she gives a little bit of historical information there on some events that have happened and taken place with other young women. It was also really cool to see like some of the places that were mentioned in the book because we had been there when we were in Mexico City, so that was really cool to read about. But yeah, this one was excellent. I highly recommend it if this sounds like something that would interest you. Oh, also, just a little note, I don't typically listen to like true crime podcasts because just in general that makes me really anxious and stresses me out, but this one did not give me those same feelings, so just wanted to mention that in case you're a little hesitant about it. I think maybe this could work for you still. Okay, so up next, I do actually own these books and it is Persepolis. I read Persepolis 1 and Persepolis 2. So this book is Marjane's graphic memoir, and she is telling us the story of what it was like for her growing up during the Islamic Revolution. We learn about the war between Iran and Iraq and the impacts that it has on her family and just on Iran. In the second one, we are with her as she's older. I loved reading about Marjane and her family. I feel like they always kept her in the loop of like what was happening. It felt like they were always like educating her so that she knew what was going on. Also, she is just like a funny person. Like, I was laughing so much in this one specifically with her as a young child and the things that she would say. She was so funny and like such a little rebel, and I loved that about her. I like flew through this one. I didn't want to put this one down, and this one just felt a little more heavy, and I felt for Marjane so much. Yeah, it just seemed like a really dark time in her life. Felt like this was a really good like stepping stone for me to kind of start learning a little bit more about Iran and Iraq and the Islamic Revolution. So this was really good. So yeah, that was Persepolis 1 and 2. Okay, and then up next is Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin. I was so excited that my library had a copy, so I put my hold in, I got my copy, I started reading it, and the first like 60 pages, I like was so into it, so absorbed. I really love like, let me just like tell you, I'm like jumping everywhere. Let me just tell you what it's about. So we are following Enid, and she is a lesbian and she's obsessed with true crime. She has a phobia of bald men. She also just like loves space and has so many facts about space that she's always telling her mom. Also, when she was younger, her father left her and her mom and he started like another family. So we're also seeing her try and build some sort of relationship with her two half sisters. There's one point in the story where she starts feeling like really paranoid that someone is like following her and like getting into her apartment because she's just like noticing slight changes. So that kind of sends her into a bit of a spiral. So that's all I'll say about the synopsis. I started reading this one physically, but then I did end up also picking up the audiobook and listening to it. I think I got it through Scribd. The audiobook narrator was really good. I enjoyed that. The very first chapter I loved. Like the intro was so good. It's her and she's in a grocery store and she's listening to her true crime podcast. But I don't know, the pacing felt a little bit off to me. I felt like the middle kind of dragged a bit. I also thought that I was really gonna love the relationship between Enid and her mom, and for some reason that like ended up falling kind of flat for me. I don't know what I was expecting, but it just kind of like didn't do anything for me. I also feel like I just love the side characters in Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead a bit more than I liked the side characters in Interesting Facts About Space. I think I just thought that they were funnier, but in this one I just like, I don't know, I didn't find myself laughing as much. There was a bit of repetition and I don't know if it was done intentionally or not. Like I can't tell if it was supposed to like add to the story and to Enid's character or if it wasn't intentional and it just was really repetitive, but that threw me off a little bit. But yeah, this was just okay. I loved Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead a bit more. I don't know, maybe it's just because like I saw myself in that main narrator in Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, that I just feel like I get her, she gets me. Maybe that's what it was, I don't know. Okay, and then the next book that I read was Hereafter by Amy Lynn. Okay, all right, this book. So I got this book on audio through Libro FM, and I was so hyped when I saw that it was available for me because I saw this one going around on Bookstagram, and as soon as I saw what the synopsis was about, I was like, I'm gonna love this book. It's gonna hurt me, but I want to read it. In this book, we are following Amy Lynn as she's telling us the story of how her husband passed away. He passed away like really sudden, really unexpected, and then shortly after he passes away, like days after, she's faced with making a life or death decision. So yeah, we're following her as she's grieving the loss of her husband, but we also jump back and she's telling us the story of their relationship and how they met, and it's just really beautiful and really heartbreaking. This one absolutely got me. I was sobbing literally the second I started. It felt like this is a super short audio. It was like 3.5 hours or so. So it was a super quick read, but I cried often during those 3 hours that I was listening. It was just like really heartbreaking, and I felt for Amy. There was like a part where she was talking about like how people kept saying like, I can't imagine what it feels like to like lose someone, and she was like, what do you mean, like, can you not imagine what it would feel like to lose someone that you just love so much? And that was really heartbreaking to read about, because I'm sure that what she was going through felt so like isolating, especially losing her husband at such a young age as well. Any book that covers grieving, I feel like I immediately want to read, and I don't know if it's like me, like my fear of grief, that it makes me want to pick these books up just to like see like what other people's experiences are. I don't really know what it is, because it always like messes me up after. This one made me want to like hug my loved ones really, really tight, and yeah, I don't know. This one was really tough to read and really heartbreaking, and like I said, a lot of tears were shed, but I'm really glad that I read it. Her memoir was beautiful, and each of the chapters are super short. They are like 2 minutes long maybe, so they felt like little vignettes. Her writing, it didn't feel really flowery, but it really like left an impact. I feel like it's a memoir that will definitely stick with me for a while, and I feel like I've been reading a lot of memoirs as I'm like talking about these, but I love memoirs, so that's totally fine with me. Highly recommend if this sounds like something that you would want to read about. All right, and then up next, this was a reread for me, and it was Sula by Toni Morrison. I'm just going to start this off by saying that there is no way that I'm going to be able to cover everything in this book, and I'm telling that more to myself because I feel like whenever I do these wrap-up videos, I'm like, I need to give all the information I can give, as much info as I can give, but with this one, it's just like such an experience, and reading it a second time was a different experience. For the synopsis, we are following Sula and Nell, and they live in this town called the Bottom, but it's up. Before we even like meet Sula and Nell, we get to look into the generations that came before them. So for Sula, we get to meet Hannah, who is her mother, and then Ava, who is her grandmother. And for Nell, we get a little insight into her mom, Helene. And I really loved that because I feel like it just gives you so much insight into Nell and Sula as they're growing up and as they're progressing in the story. I feel like it tells you a lot about them as well. The first time that I read this book, I read it with my book club, and I just thought that this book was okay. It was my very first Morrison. I felt like when I was reading it, I really struggled to like understand what was happening, but this time I feel like I was able to really understand a lot more. I don't know if I just like the second time round Morrison's writing just started clicking with me a bit more, or if I don't know, it's been like 2 or 3 years since I read Sula, so maybe my like reader brain has grown and I was able to kind of like process this one a bit better than I could like 2 or 3 years ago. But it was such a good time. I am just like blown away with what Morrison did in like 170 or 180 pages. She did so much in this book. It felt like no line was wasted. Every sentence really added to the story. I'm so excited to read more from her. I'm hoping to read The Bluest Eye next and just continue making my way through her backlist. She just has like a way with words and describing scenes. She is such a talented writer. When I read this the first time, I feel like Sula really stressed me out, and like some of the actions that she did I like didn't understand. But this second time round, I like really appreciated Sula, and I really loved her character like a lot more than I did the first time. With Sula, she does as she pleases, and it feels like Nell really kind of conformed to like what was expected of her. So they're very different. This time around, I feel like I saw Sula in a new light. Also, just like their friendship in general, I feel like there's some things that are kind of talked about that I'm like, huh, that's so interesting. I didn't really pick up on that the first time around. In my head, the first time I read it, I was like, Sula is wild. She does what she does and doesn't really look out for anyone else, which is not great. Alright, I don't know if it looks like I moved, but my phone storage was up, so I had to delete some things so I could keep recording. But I don't actually know where I left off with Sula and what I was saying. I have a bunch of notes here. But yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed my reread of this. I'm so glad that I did reread it another time because I feel like it just gave me a whole new perspective on it. And also Kat was reading it at the same time, so we got to do a little buddy read, and it was just like a really good conversation. I feel like it really helped give me some insight too to some things that maybe I didn't necessarily pick up. So that was really good. I love this. If you haven't read a Morrison, I highly recommend Sula. Here's hoping that I read some other books by Morrison. And then up next is Funny Story by Emily Henry, and shout out to Libro FM. I got my copy through them. This is my second Emily Henry. I've only read Beach Read, and I hated it. And I've been wanting to read more from Emily Henry just to give her another shot. And when I saw this one, I was super excited and immediately started listening to it. I also feel like it was such a good book to read after reading Sula, where I was like using my brain to like really try and dissect what I was reading. So this was like what I needed. But to give a synopsis on this one, we are following our main character, Daphne, and she moves to this small town. I don't remember where it is, but she moves to this small town, and I think it's a small town. She moves to a town or city. All right, technology is not on my side. My phone stopped recording again, so I don't know where I left off. I think I left off talking about Daphne moving to a city or town. She moves there to be with her fiance, and everything's all good. Everything's going great. But during his bachelor party, his friend Petra is there, and they've been like friends for years and years. And at that bachelor party, we find out that they actually love each other, and he ends up breaking up with Daphne. So Daphne is just like left to figure things out. She's not really around her family or her mom, so she doesn't really have like a support system, and all her friends that she's made there have all been his friends, and I literally don't remember his name. What's his name? Peter. Okay, his name's Peter. And she ends up moving out and moving in with Miles, who is now Petra's ex. And now Miles and Daphne are in a situation where both of their exes broke up with them to be with each other. And we kind of see them get to know each other, and sparks, start to happen with them. Overall, I really enjoyed this one a lot more than I enjoyed Beach Read. I liked getting like a bit of Daphne's backstory, some of Miles, and also like the side characters in this was really, really good. I really liked what they added to the story. I love that Daphne was a librarian in this. That was so cute. I loved hearing her talk about like her love of libraries. I'm not like a big romance reader, so this is not typically my genre, but I did have a really good time with it. I thought it was really sweet, and I just loved how Daphne kind of had to find her own community and find her own place in this town that she's not familiar with. She doesn't really know a lot of people. And, Miles, I really liked him as a character as well, so I was definitely rooting for them. I will say some of the dialogue didn't always work for me. Some parts felt kind of cheesy, and some parts I was kind of like rolling my eyes. I think if this was like a rom-com, I think it would have worked so well for me. I think just like visually, I love watching like a rom-com or like a love story. I don't know. I just like love watching it versus like reading it. But I do wonder if it's because I listened to it on audio, and if it would have been a different experience if I would have read it physically. Julia Whalen did such a good job, but whenever it would come to like the male voices, it really took me out. Like I didn't like that at all. It like threw me off, so I didn't love that. So I think maybe reading it physically might work better. My official ranking for Emily Henry is Funny Story and Beach Read, but like Beach Read way at the bottom. The next book that I read was a graphic novel, and it is Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. If you watched my spring TBR, this was on it, so I have officially read one of the books from my spring TBR. This kept me company while I was having some Sunday scaries. And in this, we're following Freddie, and she's dating Laura Dean, and as the title suggests, Laura Dean just keeps breaking up with her, and Freddie's not sure what to do. They're in high school, and she's writing to like a columnist or something that gives advice on love, and she's like telling her story of like her relationship with Freddie. We also see some of her friends and how they feel about her relationship with Freddie. I don't know why, but when I read the description, I really thought we were gonna see even more from Freddie's friends and like their relationship and their dynamic, but it felt like a lot of this was really focused on her relationship with Laura Dean, which does make sense. There was just something about the friendship that I wanted more of. But I guess that would have been like a totally different story. They're in high school and this relationship just feels so toxic, but also I felt for Freddie in the sense that like she didn't want to like not be with Laura Dean. Like she really loved her and cared about her. And I don't think she really understood like that she was not in a good situation, which in high school I feel like you are learning and sometimes you're not making like the best decisions. And I found myself reading this and being like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. The art was beautiful. Like there's these pages where it's all just like black and white, and then also pages where like there's pops of pink, and it was really, really beautiful. So I'm glad that I finally got to it. It was highly recommended, and overall, a really, really good book. And then the final two books I actually finished yesterday, and they are both graphic novels, and they're both by Benji Nate. The very first one that I read was Catboy, and we are following Olive, and she has a cat named Henry. One day she just kind of wishes that her cat was like a person, and then that happens. Her cat becomes a person. She wakes up and they are like best friends. Olive lends Henry some of her clothes and they look so cute. Between each chapter there's like an image of like an outfit that they're wearing, and it is so cute. Like I've got so much inspiration from looking at all these pictures for outfits. We just kind of watch them get into stuff and do like silly little things. Like Henry, for example, gets a job as a dog walker and makes a lot of money doing it, and it was just like such a fun read. Benji Nate's artwork is like so cool to me and I love it, so it was just fun to like go through and see the artwork and read along. The stories were so silly and it was just a fun time. I really had a good time with it. And then the next Benji Nate that I read was even shorter. It was only 54 pages, and it sounds like there's going to be more that come out. I don't know that they're out yet, but I read Lorna. I didn't love it as much as Catboy. I feel like Lorna was fun and funny, but Catboy, I feel like I just love that one so much. It was really, really cool. Lorna, the art style felt a little bit different, and I still really liked it. And in this graphic novel, we're following Lorna, and she's kind of wild. Like, she loves cats. She's obsessed with cats, and she's also like not scared to pull out a knife on you, and it's kind of dark, and she kind of does some messed up things and says some messed up things, but that just made it really funny to read. I will definitely keep reading more as they come out, but that's it. Those are all the books that I have read recently. I'm having a really good time reading. I've read some really good books. I've read some silly books. I feel like I've been able to balance the kinds of books that I'm reading pretty well. And yeah, I've just been really enjoying my time with reading. I would love to know what you're currently reading, what you're enjoying. I would love to know if you have any new favorites of the year. Always looking for recommendations. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have for today. I hope that you're doing well, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.